My name is Alison Schneider, and I'm the Education and Training Manager at AgeWell, Canada's Aging and Technology Network. In today's AgeWell webinar, Living with Dementia, exploring the intersections of culture, race, and dementia stigma, we will explore how cultural backgrounds and racial identities shape the stigma experiences of individuals living with dementia. I'm excited to have Karen Lucky Wong, a PhD candidate and sessional lecturer in social work at the University of British Columbia and recipient of AgeWell funding from the Michael F. Harcourt Policy Fellowship here with us. We also have Granville Johnson, who has been an outspoken dementia advocate for 8 years and who is living with vascular dementia and converted disorder since 2011. We're so excited to have you here with us today. So this presentation will last for the full hour. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. You can post those questions in the chat, in the Q&A box, or you may also raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question verbally. We'll kind of pause after each section to see if there are any questions that we can discuss. And then if we do have time at the end, we will have some more time for questions about the whole presentation. So feel free to ask as many questions or post comments as you like, as this is meant to be an interactive session. You can enable closed captioning in Zoom as well if you'd like. That's located on the toolbar. And note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available for replay on the AgeWell YouTube channel. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about AgeWell. Who are we and who are we comprised of? AgeWell is a nationally funded network of researchers, older adults, caregivers, and community and industry partners, government decision makers, and students. Together since 2015, we conduct research, create and commercialize technologies and services, and influence Canadian policies in order to accelerate the delivery of technology-based solutions to make a meaningful difference in the lives of Canadians. We want to help older adults maintain independence, health, and quality of life. As you can see, we have engaged with over 5,000 older adults and caregivers because co-development of technology-based solutions alongside those with lived experience is fundamental to our work at AgeWell. And that's why we're so delighted to have Granville and Karen with us today. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Karen. I'll let you share your screen and get started.
Thank you, Alison. Alison, I hope you can see my screen and Granville.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. So thank you, Alison, for the introduction, and thank you, AgeWell, for inviting us for this webinar. So this webinar will share an article by me and Granville, and also Professor Deborah O'Connor on the lived experience of dementia stigma intersecting with race and culture of the Chinese communities in Vancouver, recently published in the Journal of Dementia. I believe Professor Deborah O'Connor is here as well. Thanks, Deb, for coming. And for audience, you can scan the QR code to access to the article. And I believe Alison will also put the link in the chat for your easy access. This article comes out of the larger study, Flipping the Stigma, funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, co-led by Professor Alison Peeney, Dr. Jim Mann, and Professor Deborah O'Connor. Thanks, CIHL, for the support. We will talk more about the Flipping the Stigma project in this webinar. Thanks, Alison, for introducing me and Granville. Just a little bit more to add on. I'm currently in Vancouver, the unceded territory of the Musqueam people. I wear different hats. So apart from being a PhD candidate and sectional lecturer at UBC School of Social Work, as Allison introduced me, I'm also a practicing social worker in Vancouver, working with older adults and people living with dementia and their families. So previously, I worked in community and also long-term care, and currently in geriatric acute care. So maybe I will pass on to Granville. If Granville, you have anything you would like to add regarding to your introduction. Mhm.
Uh, Thank you, Karen.
Mhm.
So, af um, as Allison mentioned, I've been living with dementia since 2011 and converted disorder, a co a co a comorbidity uh, brain disorder around 2016. And I'm also an advocate, a research partner. Um, I, I I'm a published author. I've published a memoir called sorry, Change, called Backstory: The Many Lives of Granville Johnson. It is my debut novel. I've also written a second novel called Eagles, and I'm working on my third called The Wind Beneath My Sails. So writing has become my full-time occupation besides advocacy. And also, though I'm a musician, I play djembe, drum, and I write poetry and short stories. So I spend a lot of time living in my imagination on the web, and I really enjoy sharing my life with those who have who who are involved with the dementia support universe. Um, One other thing I like to say, I'm a long-term survivor of sexual and physical abuse. So discovering how to be yourself in spite of all that living entails, is part of my life's work.
Thank you, Granville. And Granville, I just also want to add that Granville is my mentor of my PhD thesis. And Granville has been supporting me like over the years. Like apart from this project, this paper we are going to present, I also want to express my gratefulness to Granville for all your support to me. Mhm.
Oh, thank you, Karen. Thank you. It's been a joy working with you throughout.
Thank you for all your guidance. And as mentioned, the article by me, Granville, and also Deb, um, this article we are going to talk about comes out of the larger study Flipping the Stigma, funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. So may I invite Granville to share about the Flipping the Stigma project, which you are a part of the action team. Mhm. More information about the project can also be found on scanning the QR code on the screen. Mhm. I will turn it to you, Granville. Mhm.
The Flipping Stigma website and toolkit is a product of f- 4 years of work within our group. The first, I believe, the first year and a half was in person in the Toronto area, and I, I may be wrong. Correct me, Deborah, if I'm flubbed anything. But I began as part of the group when it was had to change to Zoom as a result of the COVID. And but that change has opened the committee to being able to accept people like myself who live in rural community of BC and others who outside of the Toronto area. Our project has basically a this had to decide and and decide and create a methodology that people living with dementia and their care partners can be able to recognize stigma and how to deal with it both professionally, personally, and with left help with and
Mm,
in their community and other healthcare providers.
mm,
The It's been a marvelous tool because it involves our own voices of the group in terms of how we have experienced it, how we have learned to deal with it, and how we hope we can help others to do the same. It goes from self advocacy right through to professional and community advocacy.
mm, mm. Thank you.
My puppies. This is
Hello.
tired. This is ti um that was that was Twilight, and I have another wolfhound who walked by. Her name is Sunrise.
So nice to see twilight and sunrise. Always very nice to see them. And thank you so much, Granville, for giving the background about the Flipping the Stigma project. And I'm always very, very impressed by the work, like from the action team. And always very impressed about like the influence and the impact that the project brought, like as Granville you mentioned about like bringing real change to the community, and we will have a more discussion later with you, Granville, and hopefully also with the audience after the presentation. Thank you, Granville.
You're welcome, Karen.
So I would now like to briefly give some context about this paper and also present the findings. So after that, as I mentioned, I will have a dialogue with Granville, which will be the bread and butter of today's webinar. So therefore, I will intentionally keep about the presentation of the paper short. So I will go through it quickly. So to begin with, about the context of this project is that Granville, I, and Deb, we realized that currently there's a lack of understanding of diversity and complexity of dementia experiences, especially in terms of stigma of the racialized population. So therefore, for this paper, the question is that what is the experience of Chinese people living with dementia, which is one of the largest racialized group in Vancouver and also in BC, on stigma against dementia. How does it intersect with race, culture, and immigration status? So as you can see on the diagram on the left, it shows the intersection of like these elements and components. So in this paper, we invited 10 Chinese people living with dementia in Vancouver to share their stories. So to begin with, the first theme we would like to share is about how the finding is built in a cultural context. So Yan, this is a pseudonym, one of the participants. She feared to tell her friends in her cultural community about her dementia diagnosis. She said, I seldom tell other people, her friends, about my diagnosis. Well, those people think that I'm foolish and crazy. And she signs, well, they already see me as foolish and crazy. If I told them that I think I have a memory issue, they would see me as more foolish and crazier. And another quote from another participant, Mrs. Ma, she couldn't tell her cognitive concern to her doctor. So she said, I went to see the doctor. He talked to me for a while and said, your memories are still quite good. After that, I didn't continue to ask more. Because of the response of the doctor, it actually silenced Mrs. Ma to continue to share her cognitive concern. To some participants, the experience involved cultural loss as well. So now I would like to give an example of Mr. Chan and also his care partner, Mrs. Chan. So they could no longer go out alone due to the cognitive decline of Mr. Chan and also Mrs. Chan's health issue. He needed to rely on his son and his family. That means his son's wife, their daughter-in-law, who is a Caucasian, and also the son's daughter, who is the granddaughter of Mr. and Mrs. Chan. If Mr. Chan wanted to go out for dim sum, one of a very important cultural aspect in Mr. Chan's life. So Mrs. Chan said, well, which means the daughter-in-law and granddaughter don't eat Chinese food. So I asked, so what do you like to eat? Mrs. Chan said, we of course like Chinese food. Then I asked, how about you, Mr. Chan? Mr. Chan said it, oh, well, I don't have a preference. Well, he stopped for a few seconds, hesitating whether he should tell the truth. I like Chinese food though. So from this example, we can see that Mr. Chan, he wants to connect with his cultural aspect through dim sum. However, he couldn't do it because of his cognitive decline and also the health issue of Mrs. Chan. They need to rely on their family. However, he was not able to do so. So that's why he was feeling cultural loss. And now, as mentioned earlier, one of the highlights of this paper is about the intersection of dementia and other factors. So here, I would like to give an example of Mabel about experiencing intersection of stigma against dementia and racism. So Mabel recalled one of her experience. One time, age discrimination was obvious. I went to the supermarket. I was going to pay. I couldn't find my purse. She couldn't find her purse because of her cognitive decline. She needed more time to find it. So she said, the person lying up behind me said, the person raising the voice, you Chinese get away. I said, I'm just finding my purse. They said, raising the voice, get out of this way. So from this example, we can see that the intersection between living with dementia, because of dementia, Mabel need more time to do certain things. For example, looking for purse, a different aspect in her daily life. However, this experience was actually intersect like with racism, with people in the community. So here, this is the first example about the intersection of dementia and racism. And now let's see another example, how dementia may intersect with other factors. So another participant, Helena. So Helena couldn't access to certain services due to an intersection of dementia and language. And the service she is talking about here is about dementia support group. The social worker said their activities are for Westerners. That meant they are primarily in English. If they are in English, I already have limited cognition. and my pace of understanding of what other people say is low. How can I understand what people in the group said? I think it is in my language. If it is in my language, it would be better as I can understand what other people say. So here we can see that because of the language, Helena hesitated to join the support group service despite she really wants to. Because of her cognitive decline, she may not be able to communicate as smoothly as before, like in the group. And also because of her cognitive decline, she is actually also losing her second language, which is English. So here we can see when dementia intersect with language, it actually hinders the person to access services they really want to access to. So from the findings tell a certain implications. So one of the very important implication which we would like to bring up is that the experience of dementia stigma is very, very complex and it intersects with other factors. Very often, people may only bring up like one aspect of oppression, but not the other. However, the lived experience of stigma actually is highly complicated and intersecting in many ways. Therefore, it's very important to involve the voice of people living with dementia, to hear, to listen their lived experience, especially from those coming from racialized and cultural minority, to inform policy development. Policy and services should not develop like without the involvement or the meaningful involvement of people living with dementia. Otherwise, the service and policy would not be applicable and practical to meet what the people they really need and really want. So as I mentioned, I intentionally keep my presentation about the paper short, as the bread and butter of this webinar is a dialogue with our co-author, Granville. So I would like to invite Granville for the dialogue. And
So one second, Karen. So sorry, before we move on to the dialogue, can we answer some questions about the initial part of the presentation?
Sure, of course.
Okay. So questions haven't been posted yet, but I want to encourage you if you have any questions about the paper or the different quotes that Karen has presented, you can post your questions or comments in the chat. You can also raise your hand to ask a question verbally. I also wanted to ask, just from the first three quotes, I think, before you got into the intersections of racism and language, I wanted to understand the cultural context of some of these experiences of these Chinese older adults. So I don't understand, the idea that friends might think they're foolish for sharing their diagnosis, for not talking to the doctor again after being dismissed, just accepting that, and as well as like not expressing a preference or very subtly expressing a preference for Chinese food. Can you help me understand sort of the cultural reading of that? Like why is that the response?
So, of course, yeah. So, what we would like to highlight from the quotes here is that actually the stigma comes from, as we can see, the stigma can come from both within the cultural community, but also like outside the cultural community. For example, it can be like within like friends, family, but it could be also coming from like healthcare service providers. It can coming from like broader community as we we can see later from a quote with Mabel, like experiencing the racism in the supermarket. So one thing which is very important is to understand actually those explicit and also implicit stigma against people living with dementia actually comes both within and outside the cultural community. And another thing I would really want to bring up is about sometimes the cultural laws linked to the stigma against dementia could be very implicit unless we do a very like thorough work. For example, like Granville and I, and also Dab, we had like multiple like dialogue trying to understand what people really want to bring up, like behind like what they really want to say. So for example, in the dialogue of Mr. Chan, if we just read the dialogue itself, we may not actually see the cultural laws. However, when I also invite Granville, like, and also Dab as well, when we try to see from the experience of people with living with dementia coming from like intersecting background, we can see that sometimes the cultural laws, the cultural aspect can be very, very subtle. Because of the dementia, the person actually not able to go out and have to rely on other people. And thus the person, Mr. Chan, like lost a very important cultural link, which is dim sum in his life. So you can imagine one of the broader context is that Mr. Chan, indeed, he wasn't able to go out because of his dementia compare before he had dementia. Before having dementia, he was very, very like active. But like after dementia, he because of the cognitive challenge and also other health issue and many different factors, he couldn't like even like connect to something he really, really value in his culture from his perspective. So that's the link between like the culture and also the dementia. So sometimes that experience couldn't been seen unless we did like very, very deep work into what people say, because sometimes people may not feel very comfortable to say it like very explicitly. I hope this answered the question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. We have one more question and then we'll
Sure.
move on to the dialogue.
Sure.
We have a question asking about the study itself. So is this,
Mm.
was this study longitudinal in nature? Is it an ongoing effort? Are there additional phases of this study?
I wonder if you are asking about the broader flipping the stigma study, or are you asking about this paper particularly?
Could you let us know, Celia? But I think you can start with the paper and then,
Okay,
yeah,
sure.
both please, yes.
Both. Okay. Thank you, Celia, for your question. So for the maybe I will start from the flipping the stigma so that I can provide the context. Granville, please feel free to fill me in case I lost or missed anything. And Deb, if you are here, please feel free to jump in as well. So for the flipping the stigma project, it is a 5-year, I believe 1 year extended because of COVID. So it's a 6-year project. So this project start with an action group, and action group, as Granville mentioned, they did different things. So for a couple of years already. So it is not a one-time off, it's continuous, and there are many different like continuous meeting of developing the stigma project. And for the paper itself, so the paper itself is not like one-time interview. For some people, they actually said that they would prefer to have more than one-time interview. So that's why I would interview them more than once. It's not quantitative in nature, it's qualitative in nature. So we did like very in-depth interview with each of the person. And we also understand sometimes people may not be able to express everything they want to say. They may have something else, like after the first interview, they may have something else. They think of something very important after the interview, and they would like to have a second interview. So that's happened like in some participant case as well. So it's for this one, I would say like for most of the participants, we interviewed them once. However, for some of them who would like to have a second interview, we will invite them for a second interview. So it's not longitudinal in nature for this paper. But each interview is in depth, and also we will have a second interview if the person is open to. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Oh,
I'll let you continue. Thanks for your questions.
oh, by the way, Granville, I hope I didn't miss anything you want to add regarding to Celia's question. Celia was asking whether this project lasts for a couple of years, and I wonder if you mind answering this question. Is there anything you want to add, or my answer is okay? Yeah.
Karen, your answers quite a well. But
Mm,
there was one
mm,
aspect that I wanted to bring up about
mm,
the
mm,
another aspect of stigma
mhm,
and that is part of the cultural
mm,
um milieu, and that is in how can I put it, self-directed stigma,
right.
where our consciousness, our culture um it's, defines who we are within the culture, and that sense of self, because the overall culture may have a stigma against dementia. That internalized stigma, we internalize that stigma as an individual,
Mhm,
and it becomes a self-professed or self-directed stigma.
mhm, mhm,
So stepping out of that, of trying to address that issue, becomes a aspect of redefining of who we actually are as a person
mhm,
within our culture.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And that is one of the first hurdles of self-advocacy that must be addressed before we can even attend to the other aspects of of family dementia, family stigma, and community stigma.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Thank you, Granville, for adding about like the internalized stigma. So as you can, for those of you who read our paper and going to read our paper, this is also the experience of some of our participants as well. So the stigmas come from both internally and also externally. So actually, like these two aspects, we both need to pay attention to, because sometimes like people may pay attention to one but not another. But like as Granville said, the internalized part is also a very important part of the very complex experience, and it's also related to advocacy as well. And Granville, like building on your comment, perhaps you can further explain. May I invite you to share about your experience on the intersection of dementia, stigma, and race? Mhm.
Uh, Thank you, Karen. Yes,
Mhm.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Um, Dementia in the Black community um, is, I say Black community
Mhm.
as a all-encompassing uh, form of saying people of color, because the I'm African American Canadian. I Most Black people in BC are in fact African based. My culture is I'm goes back to Nigeria, so I am Nigerian culture, but I'm African American in my birth, and Canadian as my adopted home
Mhm.
and citizenship as well.
Mhm.
So the milieu of blackness, regardless of cultural background and his and nationality,
Mhm.
the 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 dementia is um something people don't talk about.
Mhm.
It's a suppressed subject. It is something that people try to um, diminish or ignore and
Mhm.
or deny.
Mhm.
So it creates within the dementia person a sense of extreme vulnerability because they in the overall on the surface of the community there is very little support for what is going on inside of them for
Mhm.
the changes. And so for the researcher to come to a black person living with dementia, asking for asking for uh,
Mhm.
information about what is going on with that particular person,
Mhm.
they before that person can respond authentically,
Mhm.
they have to first address their inherent vulnerability,
Mhm.
and it is that extreme vulnerability.
Mhm.
And because often the person that is asking for them is not a black person, is perhaps white or another culture or another race, that means they also have to reach out. They have to speak of they have to speak of themselves in such a way that is completely personal.
Mhm.
Living as a individual in a white community, which is most of my life,
Mhm.
the black person tends to represent all black people in the eyes of the white community.
Mhm.
And so expressing your vulnerability to a white researcher, what you're doing is suddenly expressing the vulnerability of all black people in a white community to a white community.
Mhm.
And that can feel like betrayal of your culture. So it is a what I would say a huge hurdle
Mhm.
to make that leap into self-advocacy and sharing of that advocacy with researchers.
Mhm.
And this is one of the key reasons that Black people living with dementia are uh, um, about as common as hen's teeth. There are not many of them at all. And
Mhm.
because the barrier with that that vulnerability of self and of community and a racial definition in those two factors is a huge hurdle to cross.
Mhm. 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 Thank you, Granville. And Granville, if you don't mind, I want to ask a follow-up question, considering the question may interest like other audience today. And one thing is that I remember, Granville, you during your mentorship with me, you mentioned one thing is which is very important in research collaboration is developing relationship and also trust. Is that like something like related to the experience you mentioned earlier? And also, how could we like cultivate that relationship and also trust? Mhm.
Trust. That's essential to the interaction.
Mhm.
Um, and trust develops over time.
Mhm.
It is not a short term aspect
Mhm.
or or not short-term development. It
Mhm.
requires time and it requires delicacy.
Mhm.
Uh, Initially and throughout, the researcher has to tread very, very lightly. No
Mhm.
confrontation, no leading questions,
Mhm.
being, but even before that, they must question themselves and their authenticity and their biases.
Mhm.
And that, and it's essential, it's so basic that they have to really not just
Mhm.
carefully express their words, but
Mhm.
express their, make sure their tone
Mhm.
expresses their openness. So
Mhm.
their, and their ability to listen and receive what they the information they're trying to re, re, get from their person living with dementia.
Mhm.
The building that trust over time,
Mhm.
it takes, we are hobbled
Mhm.
by the construct of the research process, the short
Right.
term 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year
Mhm.
timeline,
Mhm.
funding timeline.
Mhm.
Research, exactly, research that trust may take 6 months, a year in and of itself before that bond between researcher and person living with dementia is established, that trust is established, as such that that person will open up.
Mhm.
And so if your research project is only 1 or 2 years, you
Mhm.
are working against the clock.
Mhm.
And that is a problem with research construct as it is. It has to be developed over time, i.e., long term. And by
Mhm.
long term, I mean not just the split distance of the research project, but developing a personal connection with that person living with dementia,
Mhm.
researcher to dementia person living with dementia,
Mhm.
even to, well, how can I put it? Christmas cards,
Mhm.
uh, birthday cards,
Mhm.
checking up now and then to say hello and have a nice conversation.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things. It doesn't have to be deep once you've established a sense of connection.
Mhm.
All, but it has to be maintained if you want that person to continue being working with you, and perhaps be open to others who may come along and ask to connect with that person on other research projects.
Mhm. 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 Thank you so much, Granville. And Granville, I think like from your sharing, you highlight many very golden points. And in particular, I believe that it would also be very helpful to the audience as well about like relationship building and how to do that. And you mentioned that actually the researchers themselves, they need to be very clear about their commitment to a long-term relationship, and it shouldn't be limited to a particular timeline of the project. And another thing you also mentioned, which is very crucial, is that sometimes the things the researcher may do to show their commitment to build a relationship may not be something very big. For example, checking in, like sending cards. However, this really show their intention of commitment to a long-term relationship. And this is very crucial because the person like participating in the research, they are actually quite vulnerable in their position, considering both living with dementia and also being a person from the racialized communities. Mhm.
Exactly. Thank you, Karen.
Mm, thank you so much, Granville. And Granville, I just want to add one more thing. And Granville, you talk about like the relationship building between the person with lived experience and also the researcher. And one thing I also want to bring up from the experience of our research is that sometimes the relationship building may go beyond like between the researcher and the person with lived experience participating. So for example, in our research, like the Chinese people living with dementia, they are a very vulnerable and marginalized group. And quite hard to reach because of many different reasons. And one of the reasons is because of the stigma against dementia and also racism. So, however, like I try to talk to many different people, for example, like Granville, and also talk to people who are very well respected in the cultural communities. And one thing I learned that to invite people and helping them to feel safe to join and helping them to get the invitation is through Chinese media. So what we do is that through the Chinese television and radio, which are a cultural media, which they can many people from the Chinese community, especially older adults, they can trust. We try to spread our invitation through this media, the television and also radio. And on one hand, like this Chinese television and radio, they are in the language of the people living with dementia in the Chinese community. And also another very important thing is that these are some trusted media. Like they already have a relationship with this media. They would listen to the television and radio every day. That's something they can trust. Like Granville say, the trust is very important. So at the beginning, we have some challenges like inviting people to join our study. However, like through these strategies, or I would say a trusted way by the people living with dementia in the Chinese community, we began gradually receiving more and more like interest expressing to speaking to us about their experience. So this is one thing I want to add, like building on a Granville point about a trust and relationship building. Mhm. Mm. And yeah, so thank you. And I before moving on to the next next section is about some key message. And Granville, I wonder if there's anything you would like to add before we move on. Mhm.
Thank you, Ken. The yes, part
Mm,
of the stepping stones, as Karen brought out, is the community leaders within the Black community,
mm,
approaching them and speaking with them about your intentions
mm,
of your research
mm,
prior to connecting with per people,
mm,
individuals, is a very, very important step within the Black community,
mm,
and will will tend to alleviate many concerns of the
mm,
people if you are recommended, if your research is recommended to the people living, to the Black people, Black persons or
mm,
parishioners, for instance, if it is a church organization,
mm,
um, and then with that, how can I say it, with that recommendation,
mm,
you're much more likely to be able
mm,
to approach people within the community
mm,
and
mm,
have a
mm,
positive result.
mhm, mhm. Thank you, Granville. And I see like some similarities about the importance of building how we can build relationship with different cultural communities between like our experience with collaborating with the Chinese community and the Black communities. And Allison, I just wonder if before moving on to the next section, I wonder if there are any questions from audience. Mhm.
Yes, there are a couple of questions.
Mm,
So I'll pose the first one now.
mhm,
Maybe you can both respond. I think that would be appropriate. How would you approach a family member that is in denial that they have dementia or they don't want to talk about it?
mhm, mhm. Family member, you meant, oh, so for our study, do you mean like people living with dementia? Our study, we invited people living with dementia.
Yeah, I think that's what they're trying to say. So if
Like,
someone perhaps culturally doesn't, I think it might be in reference to the internal sort of bias
mhm,
that you and Granville were talking about. If someone is in denial perhaps of what's happening to them, how would you
mhm,
approach them as someone who cares for them?
mhm. Oh, you mean the question is about the family members or the people living with dementia?
So it's from the perspective of the person who does not is not living with dementia. So a family member of someone who might be living with dementia.
who
Oh,
happens to
I
be in
see.
denial.
I see. I see. So the denial, oh, I see. The denial is from the person living with dementia, and the person asking is a family member. Ah, I see.
Mhm.
I see. Uh, Grandpa, I think we previously also talked about it. Would you like to begin, and I will come after? Yeah. Mm,
Okay, certainly. Uh, hmm. That's a tightrope over a minefield.
mhm,
Dancing on a tightrope over a minefield. There, the denial is, of course, fear-based
mhm,
and very deep-set anxiety, and it's also a reflection of something that has been a very integral part of that person's psychology over time,
mhm,
perhaps for for much of their life. So we denial is rooted in a sense of loss of self,
mhm,
loss of your self identity. The researcher um, can encourage the the family member, i.e., perhaps to care the care partner, to be patient. Patience is the key to opening that door. Patience is the key to to taking small baby steps, and where the caregiver can can exercise their internal comfort
mhm,
by accepting their the person living their person her family members had a fear as being okay, and allowing them to express their fear, allowing them to talk about how they feel about at any given time, at any given event. Small stuff. I can't find my keys. Oh, instead of saying, "Have you looked for them?" or "Why they're well, I put them over there. Don't you remember?" Instead of going there, instead of using that kind of approach, the care partner can say, "Let's look at let's 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 look for them together
mhm,
and see if we can find them." And
mhm,
start so the loss of memory of where as to where the keys are is not pointed out as a lack of self identity, but in fact just a a a pretty much um, simple issue that can be addressed with in kind with it that can be addressed together.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And also all and slowly with that kind of approach on a daily basis, the person that with dementia is having problems with memory loss can
mhm,
start to feel comfortable about expressing this the fact that this is happening all the time, or and as then when the frequency of those memory issues can be brought out without fear, with minimal anxiety,
mhm,
we can talk about them. They can be discussed as individual problems rather than an overriding issue of I'm losing my mind.
mm,
And
mm,
believe me, when you get in those situations for the person living with dementia, losing your mind comes right to the fore.
mm,
So instead of going there and working back, start small and work one issue at a time, one problem at a time, and eventually you can the pattern will start to evolve and
mm,
become recognizable.
mm, mm,
And only in that point then you start talking about the deeper issues, what may be going on.
mm, mm, mm. Thank you so much, Granville. Yeah, I intentionally would like to invite Granville to speak first, as I'm not a person with lived experience, and I always very uh, respect and really impressed by the lived knowledge of Granville. But I also want to add, like, I know time is limited, but I will just add a few more sentences. So one thing, I'm speaking like from this research perspective, and also my experience as a social worker working with people living with dementia. I really want to echo what Granville said about like taking a small step. And indeed, for our research, one thing I realized is that many people like reach out to me like to share the experience, not only because they want to share the experience, but they want to take that opportunity of speaking from a person who may not be their family members or friends or service provider. They want to talk to somebody like me who is like an external like person to help them to understand what they are actually thinking and what is actually they feel is bothering them all the time, but they couldn't really articulate what is happening. So as we mentioned earlier in the findings, the experience itself is very complex. It may involve like many different layers. Sometimes even the person themselves, I'm not sure whether they are facing ageism, racism, or stigma against dementia, or all of them. And they just couldn't articulate that, but they know there's a problem and they feel, like Granville said, they are losing themselves and they really want to talk about it, but they couldn't talk to people around them because of stigma or because they don't want to worry them. So because of many different reasons, they reach out to us to share about their experience. So one way, like Granville mentioned, is taking very small step and trying to speak it out, to help the person to clarify what is going on so that they can connect back to their identity. And one more thing is that in our study, if you see in our paper, actually some of the people, they prefer to do the interviews like in pairs, like they have like care partners who have been like going through the journey with them for a long time. And something they brought up is that the journey has been very long, and there are many ups and downs. Like from the beginning, the person may not be even feel very comfortable to speak with their family, and until now they feel like the care partner is a very important partner in their dementia journey. So they would like to be interviewed together, like Mr. and Mrs. Chan we mentioned earlier. So it's a very long journey, like what Granville said, but like taking a small step may help. So it's a process, it's a journey. Mhm. And Alison, I know time is limited. I know also you have a couple of slides about HWell, and we have several slides. I wonder if we can take one more questions, or
Okay.
how's yeah.
Yeah, we might run a little bit over. So for those of you who are able, maybe we'll take an extra 5 minutes or
Mhm.
so, if that works for everybody. There's just one question that I thought was quite valuable when it
Mhm.
comes to researchers. They were looking for a couple of examples of meaningful involvement in research.
Mhm.
So I think this would be really great for Granville to answer. What does meaningful
Mhm.
involvement in research
Mhm.
look like to you?
Ah, good question.
Mhm.
Very good question. Meaningful involvement in research.
Mhm.
Well, I'll try not to ramble too much. little as possible. Um, the re uh, Meaningful involvement in terms of the person living with dementia is interaction with the researchers that help them understand what's going on internally with themselves.
Mhm,
That's the core of meaningful relationship. For instance, for me, helping me understand what's happening within me is what um it's what is my pay bonus or payoff for all of my advocacy, all of my research partnership. For how to find meaningful interactions as far as a research aspect is concerned. That to me involves the researcher
mhm,
personally and professionally
mhm,
opening themselves and being able to ascertain who they are and why they are the way they are, and
mhm,
how that where they checks and balances fit into what they're trying to do now with this particular project.
mhm,
Their opportunities to grow personally and to grow professionally, um, because they, in order to do that for the researcher, they have a much more difficult time than person living with dementia. They
mhm,
have to, as I mentioned earlier, ascertain their biases and their preconceptions, their stigmas, their unaddressed feelings and ideas, address them, recognize them, then take them and put them aside,
mhm,
and come to their project with as clean a personal slate as they can possibly manage, so they can, through active listening, they can be able to take in the information that they're as trying to receive.
mhm,
And that to me is much more challenging
mhm,
than than my problem or my role within the process.
mhm,
So personal growth, professional growth, huge bonus. If
mhm,
that's not happening, check yourself.
mhm. Thank you, Granville. Granville, I think what you said just tied very nicely to the next slide about the key message we would really want to bring from our presentation. And this is some very well said, like quotes from previous dialogues between me and Granville about building relationship and trust. And we already talked about the first 2 points about long-term commitment and also relationship building in research. And one more thing I would really want to bring up is that Grenfell talked about like the importance what the research can bring to the person. And one thing I remember Grenfell said is the positive impact about the contribution to the larger community. So, Granville, I remember one quote you said, the tiny seeds can build an entire forest of sweet papaya. I remember you talk about like how like the collaboration may, at this point, what we can see from the research could be small. However, it can have like a large impact, like in the long term, like building an entire forest of sweet papaya. Yeah, so this is a photo I searched for with the suggestion of Granville about a sweet papaya. Granville, is there anything you want to add?
Well, I love papaya.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, the yes, the beauty of papaya, the beauty of
Mhm,
the concept
mhm,
is that papaya is very is culturally relative to the Black
mm,
community,
mm,
but it's very rare in the white world.
mm,
So, and it it is our apples in Sagana where I've spent some time, or Nigeria, my cultural roots and origins.
mm, mm,
And but it's very rare here in
mm,
terms of plants.
mm, mm,
So, but the power of that tiny seed and what it can grow is the
mm,
same relative connection between your connection with your person with dementia
mm,
and the the global effect of of your research, well founded, well connected, well well developed,
mm,
and how that can expand to
mm,
affect family, community,
mm,
nation, and international relationships.
mm.
Um, so I would say that that power, it should be at the core
Mm,
of of your long-term ideas,
mm,
and that humility of the
mm.
tiny seed should be at the core of your initial steps and throughout.
Thank you, Granville. Very, very well said. And I think one of the motivation why the participant joining this study of the webinar we presented today is that they really have some of them, they also expressed that they really want to bring changes. Like if they are thinking, oh, they are very humble. They said our contribution may be small, however, I really want to bring changes like to what is happening. And hopefully this could like improve what is happening in the experience of other people living with dementia. So thank you so much, Granville. And the last slide is that some key takeaways from audience who are trainee. I think we get on to most of that. And one thing, the last thing, like Granville also mentioned earlier, just before our second last line, is the person living with dementia. Is very important that they are clear about the potential risk, what something will happen, like in the research. Sometimes this may not be very well communicated and it could bring harm. So that's very important to be clear at the very beginning. Mhm. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm. Thank you, Granville. And I'm aware of time, so maybe I will hand it to Allison. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, thank you, Karen, and thank you, Granville. We could go on. I mean, this has been a really lovely presentation, and there are lots of lovely comments in the chat if you haven't seen them. Respectful to Granville as well as Karen, noting your respecting Granville and making sure that he has a voice and not making assumptions. I think you've modeled that very well, Karen. So thank you so much to both for attending. I just have a couple things to share when it comes to age. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
Shall I stop my screen so that you can share
Sure.
yours? Okay, I will stop now.
So I'll share mine. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the EPIC conference that's coming up. This is the largest trainee conference at the intersection of health, aging, and technology. It's online, it's free, and it's open for everyone to attend. So if you're interested, feel free to scan the QR code or go to the link posted in the chat and register. We're very excited to have our trainees co-presenting with older adults on their research. So always a good opportunity for some real online interaction. And then for those who are trainees, this was announced last week. We will be hosting our annual Age Well Summer Institute this year in Charlottetown, PEI. So very exciting. These applications are open to all Age Well HQP and Epic AT fellows. This is expenses paid trip. So that includes airfare and accommodation, and is a competitive process. So if you're interested and you're an Age Well, HQP, or Epic AT fellow, please apply. The deadline is in March, so you have about a month to put that together. Okay, so I'd like to say thank you again. I'm very grateful to have both Granville and Karen here today to teach us about their lived experiences as well as their learning in the aging field. If you'd like to share this recording with a friend, please feel free. It will be posted on the Age Well YouTube page, and I'll send everyone who is registered a link as well. Thank you all for coming and for your questions and your kind comments. We really appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alison, for moderating. Thank you, Granville. My pleasure to co-deliver this webinar with you. And thank you, everyone, for coming as well. Yeah, and
Yes,
all
and
the wonderful questions and comments.
thank you very much. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Allison. And
Mhm.
thank you everyone for sharing your time with us. I really appreciate it.
Mhm.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a great
You
day,
too.
everyone.
Bye-bye.